Good afternoon. My name is Mark Goodman. I represent SCORE Chicago. You're watching live interactive call-in TV here on CAN TV 21. This is our last show of the season. I wanted to thank Tiffany and Steve and Omari and the whole crew at CAN TV for being wonderful for another year, and we're looking forward actually to next year to doing the show in the new facilities. So it'll be fun, and I think we're going to make some improvements to this show. So my guest is Marianne Markowitz. Marianne is the regional administrator of the SBA, which is the Small Business Administration. Marianne also did a stint as the acting director of the SBA in Washington, D.C., so we'll hear a little bit about that. Gene here is on the phone, and if you do have a question relative to small business and the SBA, you can give us a call. Gene will check your call out. Assuming everything is good to go, we'll put you on the air, and we'll go ahead and have you talk to me or Marianne. I'm going to do a little bit of quick bookkeeping. This is what we do for our editing. It's September 25th, and we're talking about the SBA here. So, Marianne, I think it's always interesting in appointed government positions is for people to learn about the people who are in the government and working for them. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, my husband and I live in the city of Chicago. It's a great place to live and raise a family. We have a 12-year-old daughter. Before joining the Obama administration and the Small Business Administration, I served as the chief financial officer for President Obama's first presidential campaign. It was very exciting. We went from $0 to $1 billion. We banked and spent and developed the systems and the budgets to deploy and manage that. It was very exciting. Had a great team, great time doing it. Before that, I was in the private sector for a career in consulting and on the corporate side in financial operations, both domestically and abroad. And that's my story, Mark. Thanks for asking.
So I think it's interesting that when people come to public service, most people in public service do have experience in the private sector and look at ways of implementing that experience in the private sector and the public sector. So what does a regional administrator at the SBA do?
Well, it's a great job. In my role, I oversee the employees and the program delivery in a 6-state region, and that includes Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, and Ohio. And I also serve as a chief spokesperson for the new administrator, Maria Contreras-Sweet, at the SBA, and for the Obama administration around all issues supporting small businesses and about the Small Business Administration.
So how is small business different in, say, Ohio than Illinois or Minnesota?
Well, small businesses differ. I don't know if it's a state-by-state thing as much as it is a urban versus rural, but many of them face the same challenges overall. So it's it's not so much a state by state. Those are sort of artificial boundaries when it comes to states. Really, we're all part of a regional economy in this area. And in this region, manufacturing is so important. So I wouldn't really define it by state boundaries.
So how would it be different between urban and rural?
Well, different resources, different customer base. For instance, I was just up in La Crosse, Wisconsin the other day, speaking to a very vibrant economic development community there that supports their small businesses, and their challenges are getting people to Main Street, to shop, versus here, Michigan Avenue, you can't walk on a Sunday. It's different scale and scope of customers. So we focus in those areas on exporting. Quite frankly, if your customers aren't around you. 98% of our customers lie outside of our borders, and we have a lot of resources at the SBA to help small businesses go down that path.
I think the interesting dynamic is that small companies used to really focus on serving a geographic area. So we had a whole community of manufacturers who serviced bigger manufacturers in Detroit or in Chicago. And with the way business is now, it's easier for companies from outside the Midwest to serve those bigger customers. So I think the challenge becomes working with some of our, manufacturing companies who have traditionally been thinking geographically to be thinking more globally.
That's correct.
Okay, so if you do have a question relative to Small Business Score and help you might need, you can give us a call at 312-738-1060. So Marianne, you started at the SBA in 2009. How has the small business environment changed over this 5 or 6 year period?
It's gotten better. So let's talk about small businesses generally, and what this environment is. They're such a critical part of the economy. We have 28 million small businesses nationwide, but in Illinois we have over 1 million, and they employ about 2.4 million employees, which is over half of our private sector employee base. 98% of our employees in Illinois are small businesses, so they're a really important part of our economy. And when I joined the agency in 2009, we were in the depths of the worst economic downturn that this country has really ever seen as relates to business and small business. So it was somewhat of a desperate time. Access to capital had completely dried up. One saving programs out there was the SBA program, which was still banks were still able to lend using our tools, which was a lifeline, in fact, for many businesses. And one of the reasons that program was so strong is that our president put forward and passed into law the Small Business Jobs Act, which allowed our programs to get stronger at a critical time and serve businesses when they desperately needed access to capital. But so fast forward now, we're in 2014. It's a very different landscape for small businesses. We've recovered and added back more than the 8.7 million jobs lost in the recession. Small businesses have added 60% of those. And in fact, it's the small business sector, the subset of businesses with 20 to 500 employees, that led the job creation in this recovery. So it's a much better time to speak to small businesses. Their challenges are much more normalized.
I think it's an interesting point that Marianne's made, that a small business can be 20 to 500 employees. A lot of times we think about small businesses, one or two people, but as far as a business getting assistance from the government and the resources in the government, those resources are available to, I think, be 25 to 500, and based upon other conditions, actually even bigger than that. So I think that we think about small businesses sometimes as very small businesses, but in reality, the breadth of the small businesses is greater. So of this renewal in small business, how much of it do you think, how much of it has really been driven by exporting?
Well, I don't have the numbers around that, but I know our exporting has gone up. It's at record levels now. We've done a lot to support that through our agency, but through this administration period, there's been a real focus on exporting. We had some terrific new programs come out. The STEP grant program, which we administer through the state, is essentially a grant that the SBA provides the state, and the state in turn provides small businesses the ability to go on trade missions. It can be as a group or individually, and it's a pretty streamlined process to apply for this, and you do it through the Department of Commerce of the state of Illinois. So we have that. We have our lending programs, and our counseling programs are strengthened around exporting. So we're doing everything we can to support the Made in USA label around the world.
I think it's an interesting point, as I worked with some people who went on a trade program, and I guess the trade program in Illinois is that Illinois pays for a goodly portion of your travel. They pay for accommodations, and then the other nice things when you do a trade mission is that a lot of the protocols for meeting with people in other countries are pretty well defined by the representatives of the state.
Right. And again, those funds for those trade missions are a direct result of the Small Business Jobs Act, which created the capital that we then provide the states for those trade missions.
And I think it's interesting, sometimes we think about the federal government getting all this money and wondering where's it's going. And a goodly portion of that federal money actually is administered by people locally.
That's true.
So SCORE, who gets some administrative money from the SBA, is all broken down into chapters. I think I was looking, Gene, and there's 10 SCORE chapters in Illinois. And, part of that is funded. And then you're saying, and I didn't realize that part of the state trade mission money is funded essentially by the SBA. So I've been asking everybody this question because it's intriguing to me. And you're seeing the growth of business incubators. In Chicago, I was reading that there's actually an incubator that if you want to get into the food business, it's, I think, something like 4,000 South. If you want to get into the food business, it's a building that somebody's redone, and you can come in and open up a food business there. And then at 1871, which is the cornerstone, incubator here in Chicago. They just opened up a food. There's a new manufacturing incubator over on Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
So how extensive is the growth of this business incubators in your region?
So I can tell you that nationally it's exploded. We know that in the 80s when the incubator concept was relatively new, there were 12 in the whole country. And now we have over 1,300 nationally. Certainly they're in rural and urban spaces, big concentration in urban spaces just because the ecosystems of big urban markets like ours are so vast. I don't have the numbers of them in the numbers of those existing in the region, across the region, but I can tell you that we work very closely with them, making sure, just like with other economic development partners, making sure that they understand the programs and the resources that we offer, and we so that they can in turn educate their participants in that. We work very closely with one locally at IIT, which is focused on science startups and science small businesses. We have a real intersection there because a lot of our SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research grantees, are at that incubator. So we collaborate with them often. They are also located and work closely with a cluster that we fund called the Smart Grid Cluster. So there's a lot going on at that incubator. We have a lot of collaboration with them. We've taken a bigger step into the space, by the way, recently in the accelerator area, which is not exactly an incubator, but closely related. And we launched an accelerator challenge nationally. We had over 800 applicants for this challenge. We chose 50 as winners, and each of the 50 winners received $50,000 as either seed capital to start their accelerator or growth capital to grow their accelerator. So that was exciting, and as a result of that, we're building a national database as a resource for accelerators, and also for us to track the impact of the accelerators. Because in return for the grants, these accelerators provide us with data. And there were two local winners. Actually, Good Food. I don't think it's the food accelerator you were speaking of, but it's out in Oak Park.
Okay.
And then also Makerspace, which is in Park Forest, I believe, and that's sort of a tinker, artisan, and inventor space.
So I've actually been studying this a little bit. I have a client, and I'm doing some work with the people at Northwestern, because there's a question as to what are accelerators, what are incubators, what's basic science, and especially when you're looking at things relative to science. If you think about for 50, 80, 90 years, there's been a lot of funding of basic science. The challenge that people have had with basic science is how do you turn basic science into commercialization? And big companies used to have a process to do that, and that's a longer discussion. But the idea here is if you have basic science, as it was explained to me, an accelerator is a short-term period of time where you have an idea and you're getting some money to actually accelerate it. And the key thing is that if you're interested in an accelerator, I was talking to a guy who does real estate, he says, understand the terms and conditions of your accelerator. Because an accelerator is not shared office space. They're giving you money, they're giving you help, but they have an expectation that you're going to do something.
Yeah, often there's an equity payout through the accelerators. Some incubators take that as well. I mean,
Right.
you just need to understand what you're getting into in either space, but they can be a great resource. Then
the idea is that conceptually you could graduate from an accelerator into an incubator, or you could go, into an incubator. And then the idea ultimately is that you come out of the incubator and you're a fully grown business. So especially if you're in the world of science or the world of something technical, I mean, this is probably important for you to explore. People from Square can help you with it, or there's a lot of people who would get assigned, especially at educational institutions, who are focused at helping people through that process. So let's step back here and say that, we were in 2009. There was cash flow. There was problems getting money. We've grown out of that, so it's a little bit easier to get money. It's not, perfect, but it's never that easy to get money because that's the nature of getting money. But what do you feel are the top two challenges for a business owner today?
In these times which are more normalized, still access to capital is really a number one challenge. But it's a different discussion. Before, in 2009, it was sort of desperate access to capital for survival, and now it's growth capital or startup capital. Those conversations, are always challenging. If you're starting a business, you have to go out and prove yourself to a banker or to a lender of some sort that you're a good risk, and that can be challenging. It's really very hard to get startup capital. Our programs support it, so certainly some of our banks use our programs to provide startup capital, but we also have some programs through mission-driven lenders that are really dedicated to startup capital, like our micro-lending program that we offer through Axion, caps out at $50,000 per loan. And then we also have our Community Advantage program that goes up to $250,000, also offered through mission-driven lenders who take a different sort of evaluation of businesses, and also offer technical assistance. But even if you're a really strong company and you're growing and you need growth capital, it's still a conversation every time you go to your banker and ask them to increase their exposure to your business. So that's where our other programs come into place. With our guarantees, the 504 and the 7A program can help encourage a lender to go further out on that risk continuum and lend more money to your business with a 75 or 85% guarantee in place.
I think the other thing relative to capital is maybe an emphasis on smart capital. You have opportunities now if you've been financing your company on a credit card. Mm-hmm. There's lots of instruments that are available for you to take your debt down from maybe the 15-19% that you're paying on a credit card down to very reasonable levels. And that's certainly a discussion for any business person should have with their banker, because there are a lot of programs available that could, save you hundreds of dollars if you have been, financing your company on a credit card, which 5 years ago may have been your only choice.
Right. So, but you did ask me about the two top, and I just said one. The other one is really we find just generally, being an entrepreneur can be a lonely place. Finding the right sort of advice, good, strong, objective outside advisors or mentors is a real challenge for entrepreneurs. And so, our programs can help with that too. Obviously, our partnership with SCORE is critical in that area. SCORE has working and retired executives and specialists in different industries. It can serve as very valuable mentors. And then our small business development centers, who are located at a myriad of hosts across the state, whether it's chambers or universities, they can be helpful, and our women's business development centers can be helpful. But we also have a specialized program for entrepreneurs. It's a cohort program that's called Emerging Leaders, and that's a really great opportunity. The focus of it is to take owner-operators of good, growing businesses, established businesses, and turn them into CEOs. Grow their chief executive skills, and help them develop a peer network. Through the program, they also develop a 5-year growth plan. So it's an excellent program. I highly recommend it as another resource for businesses to address that challenge.
Okay, so we're going to switch gears here for a minute, but I do want to see if we have a call here. So,
take your call, and you can discuss it with him. Hold on, please. Thank you. Oh, additional one. That's fine. Hold on a moment.
okay. Caller, go ahead and ask your question. Do we need to press a button here? Are you there?
Jumpstart my business. Hello?
Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to, further my business with a website, as well as trying to find out different grants or programs by which I can help fund my business. It's doing good on its own, and I started it on Facebook, and I have a pretty substantial clientele, well over 50,000 followers and fans buying various items from T-shirts to hats and shorts. And I'd like to take it to the next level. Do you have any advice for me?
So what would you suggest to somebody who has a established clientele and wants to take their business to the next level?
Well, I think your first step is really to stop at SCORE or the SBDC and get some real advice about that. We have very talented advisors and consultants that can help meet with you one-on-one, understand your business's challenges and needs, and help you, develop your growth plan.
Right, and we'll give you some contact information relative to SCORE. I did have to drop you off because I have a question I want to get to Marianne here, and we only have about 3 or 4 minutes left. Okay, because we were talking about earlier before we went on the show, Marianne, you were 3 or 4 months in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, 3 months.
Okay, 3 months in Washington, D.C., where Marianne was the acting national administrator.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about your observations from looking at the services that the SBA and the people provide in Chicago from this national view.
Sure. Well, first, it was a privilege and an honor and a great opportunity, and I enjoyed every second of it. But I think, I had been at this agency for about 5 years at the point that I served in this capacity as an acting administrator, and I really felt I knew the agency and the power of the agency pretty well. But I was surprised when I went to D.C. to learn, how powerful this agency is as an advocate for small businesses. And one of the reasons for that is that the current administrator, Maria Contreras-Sweet, and when I was the acting administrator, you're a cabinet level official, which means that you're at the White House every week, meeting with either a subset of the cabinet in principal meetings, or informally you're being consulted by cabinet members, on all sorts of impact that these policies have on small businesses. And you're meeting with the president constantly. This is really important because when the subject of small business comes up, no matter what the topic is, generally they look at the administrator for advice. And that advice comes from our interactions with the small businesses in the field and the work that we do, understanding their perspective and their challenges. So we're a very powerful vehicle for advocacy, and that was really a great thing to see.
So the idea here is that when people are out in the field and they're asking to hear what you have to say, they're really interested in hearing what you have to say.
Right. And, we did significant roundtables leading up to the crafting of the Small Business Jobs Act. And then when the actual act was passed into law, I really saw the feedback that we had gathered, come to life in being responded to by that piece of legislation. I didn't probably understand how streamlined and straight-lined that path is for that discussion. It's really interesting. It's really from the small businesses to the SBA in the field straight to the White House. But it was also really great in D.C. to see how interested all the other cabinet officials and the president are in small businesses' feedback and and the impact and the challenges that they face. So
I think the other observation that we had when we were talking is that we a lot of times think about like everything in Washington, D.C. having to go up to the president. But in reality, there's a lot that takes place at meetings, like in between people.
Oh yeah, there's a lot that goes into crafting policy, and a lot of impact and input that's considered in the process.
So I think the suggestion relative to this is that if you do have an opportunity to participate in the forum, or if you do have a need, let your need be known, because people do listen to it. So is there any change that you can think of that said, hey, I listened to these people and I was in Washington, D.C., here's what we talked about, and this is something we're going to do?
When I was there, we were in the midst of the rollout of the Affordable Care Act website.
Okay.
So it was an interesting time, but and because there were some challenges with that, there was a lot of discussion, and not just the website, but just generally the law and the adjustment that small businesses were going through, and understanding the resources available to them under the law. And we were very directly involved in deciding about the delay of the employer shared responsibility provisions, and some really key assistance that came to small businesses as a result of the policies that were developed while we were there. So
sometimes we don't think they're listening, but in reality they are. I'm going to flip through a couple slides real quickly here because there's some things I want you guys to know about. Okay. Small Business Expo coming up October 3rd at the UIC Forum. We've got workshops. We'll be announcing our winners. You've seen these slides before. Just so you know, we also have our 3 finalists on our elevator pitch contest: Savo Digital Sommelier Solutions, Infinity Strategic Group, and House Financial. So you can come to the Small Business Expo and find out who got first, second, and third place, and we'll challenge our first prize winner to spend the money like they said they were going to. Some contact stuff for you to look at. If you do want to find SCORE on Twitter, we're at SCORE Chicago. You can watch this show and other shows on the YouTube channel at SCORE Chicago Video. Or if you do want to get a counseling appointment, check us out at scorechicago.org. You can also email us at SCORE Chicago or give us a call at 312-353-3745. 7724. I wanted to thank Marianne for being my guest again. It's always a pleasure having you. This is our last show of the season, so you'll have to wait till next summer to see us again in our new studio. Come to the Small Business Expo, and good luck in your business.